Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns. I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis, and we have as our guest this evening, Bill Gilligan, who is now the associate coach, assistant coach at Merrimack College. And you've been playing hockey for quite some time, and you've been around the world a couple of times on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still playing as much as I used to, occasionally, but not too much. But I have been involved in hockey since I graduated from high school. So it's been a...
You played for Beverly High, didn't you?
Beverly High School, yeah. For 3 years. And back then it was only a 3-year school. We had 3-year middle school. And yeah, I had a great time at Beverly High School. Great teams back then.
And I guess the thing that got me interested in having a discussion this evening was a little background. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and the high school I went to, LaSalle Academy, was one of the powerhouses in local hockey. And then there was Burrillville, and their claim to fame was the coach knew where all the ponds froze early. So they had more ice practice than the other teams. And then there was Mount St. Charles from Woonsocket. And the rumor around was they were importing hockey players from Canada, bringing in ringers. And that was my first clue that hockey is more than just a local thing. And I guess we got talking one day at the Y, and you mentioned that you were doing a lot of recruiting, and based on your experience in Europe, playing and coaching there, you were bringing in students and hockey players from, guess where?
Yeah, correct. Well, hockey's always been an international sport, more so in Canada than in any country. Back when I played in college and back when we were growing up, I think most of the college players would be coming from Canada, and that's still somewhat the case. But nowadays there are players from all over. Like I spent a large part of my career in Europe, and so Coach Dennehy from Merrimack, who I worked with at University of Massachusetts Amherst, when we were there, we brought in a bunch of European players, and I had connections back there. And we've continued to do that since we started working together at Merrimack as well. We've had 4 Swedish players, a Finnish player, a player from France. So hockey is not just played around Boston and not just in Canada. It's played all over the world now.
When you bring in a student from Sweden or Finland, how do they mesh with the language?
Well, I think that's, I don't know, as I say, I spent a lot of time over in Europe, and one of the things that you notice when you get over there is when you get off and, and start asking for directions or for anything, how quickly they turn to English and how well they all speak English over there, and especially in the major cities. So English is the #1 secondary language they learn in schools over there. And the kids that come over here, a lot of times they'll come over a little bit younger. They won't come directly from high school graduation to college. Sometimes they'll even come over earlier, play a couple of years in prep school or junior leagues over here, and so their English is even better. But most of the kids are very, very good students. They're great people, and they're ready to embrace the American way of life, and they do a great job with it.
But why do they come here instead of, hockey is fairly popular in Europe. So why do they come to this country, 5,000 to 6,000 miles from home to play hockey?
Well, for a number of reasons. I think that America probably has, there's still the reputation back there of being the best country in the world, the best place to be. The hockey is one part of that. With the National Hockey League and professional hockey over here, people want to try to play over here, and this is an avenue for them to hopefully make it to the National Hockey League. And so we have had players. One of the players I recruited at UMass was his father was my former player, and he ended up going from UMass Amherst to the National Hockey League, playing for the New York Rangers. So a lot of the kids will come over hoping that they're going to be developed as a hockey player and as a student, and getting the broad-based education that one gets, attending a university, as well as having enough time to show people over here they might be a potential pro hockey player.
But how do they choose which college to go to? There's so many colleges that offer pretty good hockey. in the Northeast and the Midwest.
Yeah.
How do they choose?
Well, that's our job. I mean, if you see some of the teams like Boston University or University of New Hampshire, University of Maine, and you know, some of the best schools over here, they all have European players, and it's our job to go over there and watch them play, or to communicate with them and tell them that they come to Merrimack. Don't go to Boston University. Don't go to Boston College. And you know, we have a better school or a good a school as they have. So it's all in the recruiting process. Some of the kids come over here and they don't know anything about Merrimack College. They don't know anything about, you know, Hockey East, the league we play in, and sometimes that's an advantage for some schools like ourselves, where like a lot of the people playing hockey around here and growing up here, they have heard the name Boston University and the Terriers a lot more than they've heard some of the other schools like ourselves. Yeah. So sometimes we can sell our school just as easily as the other schools try to sell themselves.
But you know, like you say, BU, BC, Northeastern, big names, they win a lot. That's attractive to people. You're right. They don't hear of Merrimack as much. Now they're beginning to hear a little more of UMass Lowell because they're doing pretty well. But what do you say to a kid that's, you know, gee, I've had somebody from BU call me, and I know how good they are. Mm-hmm. So I could be on a winning team there. Tell me, why should I go to Merrimack instead?
Well, you tell them how good a coach you are, number one, and let them know that they get a good development through the coaching staff, and that's kind of a joke aside a little bit. But that's part of it too. You will have to build a trust up and a respect up, and I think that sometimes work. You know, someone like myself being in the business as long as I've been, as I say, I've been coaching, you know, players' children, and so that sometimes works in your advantage, as well as Coach Dennedy, who's been there for 15 years or so at Merrimack, that you build a reputation as being good coaches. Sometimes you do have the handicap that our program hasn't been the same as UMass Lowell, who won the championship again this year, or maybe some of the other more traditional established hockey programs. But they can't take everybody, and sometimes, you know, we can convince the player that you have an opportunity with us where maybe you're not going to get the same opportunity if you go to the other school. And you have all those, you know, pros and cons, but there are a lot of good hockey players out there, and as George said, it isn't just a sport that's played in the colder regions now, like around New England or Minnesota or in Canada. I mean, some of the best players now, that Matthews is playing for Toronto, and I'm one draft pick overall, a second pick overall, grew up in Arizona, and some of the players that come from California, and we have a player on our team from Florida. So, you know, hockey has really grown across the country and also across the world.
Well, the other thing that's always surprised me is the first time the Russian team came over to play the Bruins, that the Bruins were down to 30-second shifts. Mm-hmm. They just couldn't skate with the Russians. And there's some mythology that I've at least inherited, I guess, that, again, the rinks in Europe are much bigger than the rinks in the United States, which has a different character to the game, being a little bit more open. Is this still true, or how do they adjust to the different styles?
Well, I think now things have changed quite a bit. I mean, there are a lot more Europeans, Russians, you know, playing over here than ever before, and there are a lot of players that go over there to train and to work out. And I think that one of the things that's happened has been kind of a melting pot in the hockey world, in the sense that we've adapted some of their training techniques and the full-year programs, which has helped us in North America. And vice versa. I think they've learned from our training methods and the way we do things, and how the North Americans like to compete and battle, and how hard and tough it is as a sport to be good at. So I think you get the advantages of nowadays. People travel all the time. Even youth teams travel over to Europe, and so you have kind of a little bit mixture of the hockey cultures. The bigger rinks help. Smaller players are more technical and more skilled. I went over to Europe to play after I played a couple of years of pro here, because I thought it would be, you know, a place where I could play and utilize the way I like to play the game, the way I played the game. But players now are so well developed and well trained. It's, you know, you have people like Chara for the Bruins who comes over here and took a long time getting established, but you know, his work ethic and the way he trained back there, it just carried over here, and now he's at 40 years old, still one of the best players in the Bruins. and probably has won the the strength and conditioning test every year they've had it there, because he just he's established himself as being one of those guys that just knows how much you have to train to be a professional hockey player and how important it is. And so it's been a kind of an evolution of hockey that they've adapted what we've had, and we've adapted some of the things that they've had. So it isn't that much different anymore.
Yeah. I remember, I think this has got to be 30, 40 years ago, somebody brought a Russian coach through town on a tour, and he did a demonstration up the hill from us when that used to be a hockey rink. It's now the skating palace, or it's going to be something else. Mm-hmm. And I remember they got a goalie out there, Todd Lampert, and the Russian coach was running him through the exercises. And it seemed like 2-3 minutes into this routine, Lambert's laying there, just warmed out. And I mean, he put him through everything. And he's in full pads, up and down, back and forth. And you think about, that's the way the game is played. You're making a block, or another shot's coming in, you got to get ready for it if it's coming from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's, as I say, hockey's changed a lot, and the influence from Europe and the training methods and also maybe the style of play has made hockey over here better. And I think that, you talk about the goaltenders that's probably been the biggest and the strongest evolution. You go back to like Timmy Thomas and how he looked in the goals, and now Tuukka Rask and how he plays the goal. It's when you look at him, you can't even see that there's an opportunity to score any goal. It's so big and they're so athletic. I mean, Todd Lampert, I know Todd pretty well, and he's not going to be happy to hear that.
Well, I'm going to defend Todd anyhow and say, he's a coach at Northeastern,
right?
And a good coach at Northeastern. He coaches goalies.
Todd's a great guy. He's
he's a nice guy.
I grew up with Todd,
really.
And I think he'd grant you, George, that he was not always the best trained athlete too. So he needed a little bit of work.
Well, that was the surprise to me, is that this is again. But when the Bruins were playing the Russians, Johnny Busick was doing 30-second shifts. He could not skate with them.
Yeah.
And you think
that was one of the points that I wanted to bring up. Many moons ago, the Busick days, the Teddy Green days, you go to the Olympics, you watch the Olympics, the Russians and the Europeans played what I considered skilled hockey. Mm-hmm. And the Americans... well, let's just say there was a fight and a hockey game broke out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it was the big bad Bruins against the Broad Street Bullies, right?
Yeah, and is that still the case? Because frankly, I don't watch a lot of hockey. Okay, I'm more of a basketball person.
Yeah.
So, is it still in this country? Having a fight and then a hockey game breaks out?
No, I mean, there's still fighting, and it's probably the only sport, I guess, where fighting is allowed, tolerated, or somewhat encouraged there. And maybe it's the nature of the game, because, people are going pretty fast, and they're really well trained, and they have sticks in their hands, so they're allowed and they're encouraged to hit and whack each other. So once in a while, things get a little bit out of control. It has changed quite a bit. It isn't like the old days of the big bad Bruins. I mean, there are tough hockey players, and it's a tough sport, but it isn't like everybody's going out on the ice to fight, and that's part of the game. It's kind of like, once in a while, in a small part of the game or in a moment in the game, sometimes people get, out of control. The European game has always been, as you say, it's been, that technical big ice sheet that, it's wider, it's a little bit longer there, and that encourages players to play with more skill, because otherwise you're not bumping into the boards as much as you do here. Yeah. So it's a little bit the mentality thing, the cultural part of it. But the game has changed there as well as here, as I say. I think they have taken it a little into our. They have taken into their game a little bit what we've had over here. They play more physical and tougher over there, but they don't fight at all over there. And here we've adopted a little bit their training techniques and as well as their skill level. And so our game has never been so good as it is now in North America. But it isn't. You should come to a game. I think you'd enjoy it.
I'm sure I would.
It's a lot more interesting than basketball. Basketball I find fascinating, but the last 2 minutes on, or down to the wire.
Wake up for the last 2 minutes.
Otherwise, it's not much going on for me. But hockey is an exciting game, and I think that the fights you can do without, but they still once in a while occur.
Okay. Now, going back to recruiting for a minute, what types of things do you promise the kids to entice them to come to the school? Like, is it scholarship? Is it education? Is it you're going to have one heck of a good time? You know, what is it that you use to entice the kids to come?
Well, I think all of the above. You know, I think that you have to emphasize the things that they're going to get out of it. And I wouldn't say promise the kids. I would say, you know, the opportunities you provide the kids is a great academic environment where they can pursue whatever academic interests they have. That's number one. And I think also there is an athletic component as well and a social component as well. So those three avenues of academics, athletics, and then social life. Although social life for our players, you know, we play in a tough, demanding league, you know. I mean, and it's not like, you know, some of the basketball programs where you see us on TV every single night, you know, like in this time of year. But we have a lot of our guys go to, you know, play. We have two players, Chris LeBlanc from Winthrop and another player, Hampus Gustafsson from Sweden, and they're both playing professional hockey now. So they've taken that step from day one, or from one day from the campus to the next day to the National Hockey League or to the American Hockey League. So a lot of the players will come over, and you give them the idea that they have a chance after maybe 4 years, some players after, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 years, to play professional hockey. And then you say you're going to have, you know, you're going to have the academic degree that you can fall back on.
Now that brings up another point. When you see some of these kids on TV being interviewed, okay, and I'm not talking hockey, but whether it's basketball or football or something, you know some of these kids aren't going to classes, they can barely speak English, they can't add 1 and 1, but they can play a sport. And what type of factor does that come in recruitment? I mean, do you want a guy that comes in because he can play well and get you a couple of victories, regardless of his academic career?
Well, I mean, I don't feel offended by what you're saying, because I think there are examples of some college programs and some sports where, you know, the players are not going there at all, or mainly for the academics. Hockey, I don't want to say we're special, but I say almost all of our players have graduated. I don't know if there's any that haven't, you know, or if they haven't, it's because they've signed pro contracts and said, I'm going to finish the degree later. I know all our players can speak well and read well, and they're smart people. You'd be amazed at how well educated our players are. I mean, I'd like to show you some information about how well our players have done academically and how they major in engineering and they're 4.0 students. And
see, that's a testament to your school.
Well, I think that, you know, I don't want to say we're unique. I think a lot of schools have there are a lot of great people out there, you know, and a lot of the great people are not just great people and students who are concentrating on trying to be a good person and a student. A lot of people have learned to, you know, coordinate, you know, being a good athlete or being someone who is good in some other extra, you know, activity, as well as the academics and being a good citizen. So I do think you know, college sports is a big business. Hockey is not as big a business in college as basketball, football.
Yeah.
Are there any other college
you're
sports?
You're still running into the situation where a lot of people feel that their career path is to get into the pro sports. And a college team is nothing more than a farm team for some pro sport. And you're going to run into this kind of a situation, I think. And I think that's what you're alluding to, that there are people that say, hey, I know I'm not going to come out of here with a Phi Beta Kappa key, but I'm going to come out of here with good stats on my sport, and some pro scout is going to find me, and my career is made.
What gets me cranky about stuff like that is that a scholarship or a place in the school is taken up by an athlete instead of a scholarly person.
But the point he's getting to, I think, is that a lot of these schools, it's another program just like engineering. You can become a major in sports of some sort. And being able to play a sport is part of that game.
I see your point, and I think you're right somewhat. I don't think you're right across the board. I don't think you can generalize totally. And I mean, I can take our hockey program and some of the hockey programs, because that's a sport I'm involved in and I know really well, or I know better than the others, is that our GPA and the level of student that we bring in and the quality of person we bring in it's not people who are at the bottom. It's people at the very top. And most of the players that have gone through college and places where I've been are really, really impressive people, and they do impressive things. I don't want to talk so much about the other sports because I don't know, but I see and read the whole same stories you read about some of the major programs where they're just factories for the pros, and I think you're right there, but I don't think that's across the board.
And see, I don't know that much about hockey, but I do see it in football and I see it in basketball.
Sure.
And when you see, I think it was a couple of years ago, the University of Maryland graduated maybe 17% of their basketball players. To me, that's unacceptable. But that's why we're talking about hockey, and I'm glad to hear that those kids are better.
Yeah, I don't want to stand here and defend any program and portray hockey as being the place where everybody does it correctly and it's perfect. It's not. But at the same time, I think there are some stories. We can see it. We all see it, and we see it right now during March Madness, and we see it during the football season. How important those programs are to those schools, those universities. I agree with it. It's extreme. It's out of control. But you do have people there who, in those sports, are Tom Brady. Okay, that
a 6th round draft pick.
Well, at that, I mean, he didn't go. He went to school to do both. Okay, and I'm saying there are more people doing that than are doing what you're trying. Or, I'm not saying you're trying, but you're
what I'm
implying,
saying happens.
What you're implying, and we all see those horror stories, and they're very visible. I think some, I kind of think basketball should have some other rules, and I don't know enough about how. But it seems like the players are there for 1 year, maybe 2, and it's very rarely that for most of the big schools, the players stay there 4 years and graduate. But that's America. That's our culture, and there's some good parts about it and some not good. I think to give you a little more insight, hockey is not to say that we're unique, but we have a different culture, a different subculture of the sport. I mean, to play hockey nowadays in the States, it's changed. You talk about being an outdoor player. I grew up with Todd Lampert playing hockey in the local ponds, Kelleher's Pond or wherever, and then we went over to Lynn Arena and practiced, or sometimes down at Gordon College. It's changed now. Most of our players don't play on the ponds; they play in the rinks. And it's also become a sport where hockey is probably the most expensive, one of the most expensive sport. It costs $10,000 to $20,000 in the so-called elite programs per child now to play a year of hockey. So you're getting a different group of people now than people that used to play the sport.
Well, you're getting into a game where you really got to be dedicated to it. I know when my kids were thinking about playing hockey, you get up at all hours of the morning so you can get ice time. And even when I was playing with the big kids, the over 35 leagues, the over 30 leagues, ice time is hard to come by. Now it looks like there's almost a rink almost everywhere. And you've really got to have good quality ice, because one of the things that slowed me down was I broke my leg playing pond hockey because my skate slid into a crack. And once it dropped in the crack, I didn't stop. It just kept going on.
You always see there's excuses for everything.
Some of us need them still,
But that is the reality of the game. If you want to be good at it, you've got to have good equipment too.
Yeah, right. Obviously, ice time is key, and I say maybe it's the climate or whatever. We don't get as much natural ice, outdoor ice as before. But also, the influx of Bobby Orr back then, and when he was good, and the Bruins are so good in the Big Bad Bruins, they built all these rinks everywhere. The rink up the street, which they have subsequently closed down. But even now, there's it's kind of like, well, there have been so many successful teams in National Hockey League playing in places like Boston or playing down south in Tampa and winning the Stanley Cup, or out in L.A. with Gretzky, that hockey is just, there were hockey rinks everywhere that they were before. Now Endicott College has one. So you see that happening all over the country now, and that's why there's a tremendous boom of hockey and hockey players coming from the United States, from all these different regions, where before they were just basketball, football players, or maybe baseball players.
And there are now a lot of women's hockey teams.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest growths in our sport, is the women. They've increased their numbers tremendously. And I mean, sometimes when I go to the hockey games and watch the players, I take a double take, because I go to watch, some of the high school or prep school players, and you don't notice right away that they're girls. That they're so talented and so many good ones. They've really done well with it.
No, I find women's sports to be sometimes more fun to watch, because, like in basketball, like I say, I haven't seen much in hockey, but they play the game.
Yeah, I like watching women play sports too. I think we all do. I don't know if we like them playing football, or if they even do. But I think that the rules are different in hockey. The women they don't check. They're not allowed to play, as physical as we are. And you can see the skill level. It's very, very high. It's a fun game to watch. You're right.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of high school teams that have female goalies playing for the boys.
Yeah, oftentimes some of the girls, because they're so good and a little bit better than the boys at an earlier age, they'll play on the boys' team up to a certain age, and sometimes even into high school.
Yeah. But again, it's a sport that, by its nature, you're going so damn fast that when anything happens, you get hit hard or you hit the boards hard, and it's going to be in an emotional game, and it's awful hard to just turn off that effect. And
in the time we have left, which isn't much, how many kids get injured, seriously injured? We know of, what's his name, Roy from BU, that
Travis Roy, yeah.
Travis Roy, yeah. But are there many serious injuries in hockey?
Well, I mean, they've always tried to cut down. There's a concussion problem in hockey, like there is now in football, and they're trying to eliminate that by stopping the checks to the head, the checks from behind. So it's a rough sport. I think that a lot more people get hurt, riding their bike on the street, or getting in the car and driving too fast and doing hockey. But
right, but they don't get the publicity that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not
but,
spectacular.
Yeah. Thank God there aren't many Travis Roy, cases. So they try to legislate the play that is real dangerous, and I think the sport's probably as safe as it's ever been.
Yeah, and I know I've seen the equipment, because I sell equipment. Todd and I are in similar businesses. Okay. And, the equipment's quite good. It's quite expensive, but it's quite good.
Yeah.
And it does protect the kids as best as possible. But I'm glad you brought out that point about more people get hurt in car accidents and stuff. So just to put in perspective that hockey is a safe sport, and it's a fun sport, and kids should, kids need to get away from the computer and out there doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess so, especially my kids. So if they're watching this, tell them to put the cell phones away. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming. This has been a very fun half hour. It didn't take too long, did it? It goes by quickly, but very educational, and I hope you learned something. A nice light show about sports, and get your kids going. And maybe they'll get a scholarship. It's a good way to go to school. Thank you for watching.